7 years ago, a boy disappeared without a trace in the Amazon rainforest. No footprints, no remains, no closure. The world forgot, except his mother. And now, deep in the heart of a place no map dares name, an explorer uncovers something impossible. A journal wrapped in a child's blood-stained shirt, its pages filled with fear, symbols, and whispers from a mind unraveling in the wild. The first page reads, "He's still watching me." What begins as a discovery becomes a descent into something far darker than they ever imagined. Rainfall struck the jungle in hard, hot sheets, the kind that soaked skin and bone within seconds. Dax Moreira, boots thick with mud and decades of regret, paused beneath a twisted ceiba tree that loomed like a sentinel. The machete in his right hand hung low, his left brushing away ferns the size of his torso. Something glinted beneath the roots. He knelt, breath caught. Not gold, not bones. A wrapped bundle, crusted plastic bound by what looked like hair. The air grew denser, still, as if the jungle were holding its breath too. With fingers trembling more from instinct than fear, Dax peeled back the plastic. Inside, a journal. Its pages were swollen, stained, warped by years of rot, but still legible in parts. The cover was torn from a school notebook, the kind sold for a few reais in Brazilian roadside stands. A child's drawing decorated the corner, a stick figure under a tree. But it was the shirt, faded blue with tiny white rockets, that slammed into his memory. He had seen it in the missing person flyer 7 years ago, passed hand to hand through search parties, the same one the boy's mother clutched when begging him to join the search. Inside the journal's first page, a sentence scratched in childlike block letters. "Don't follow the eyes." Dax stood, the rainforest pressing in tighter than before. The sound shifted, birds too quiet, the wind humming through vines like a breath against his neck. He turned the journal slowly in his hands. There were symbols, repeated patterns. A crude map. A date circled over and over, April 11th. The boy had vanished on April 11th 7 years ago. Dax looked deeper into the trees. He'd found something he didn't understand, and something he wasn't sure he was meant to. The jungle, for once, said nothing, but it felt like it was watching. The scream tore through the canopy like a blade through silk. Elena Costa ran barefoot, thorns carving her feet open, arms outstretched as if she could still catch him, her son, Daniel, before the forest swallowed him whole. But the only thing she caught was silence, deafening, total, wrong. They had stopped by the river for lunch. One moment, Daniel was chasing butterflies near the edge of the tree line. The next, he was gone. No splash, no call for help, just vanished. Back at camp, chaos surged like the Amazon's own floodwaters. "He was just here," Elena sobbed, her voice cracking against the humidity. Her husband Paulo scoured the perimeter with 2 local guides, machetes swinging wildly, panic overtaking strategy. The rescue team arrived within the hour. Medics, volunteers, local police. Radios buzzed. Names were shouted into the trees. "Daniel! Daniel!" But the jungle offered no echo. A grizzled guide named Tainá refused to enter further without ritual. She tied red thread around her wrist, muttering in a blend of Portuguese and Ticuna. "This is where the eye sleeps. We don't wake what watches." Elena stared at her. "What are you talking about? He's just a boy. He's scared, not cursed." Tainá didn't answer. She just wouldn't cross the vine-choked ravine ahead. Said the boy had wandered past a line that should not be crossed. Paulo showed the team Daniel's last photo, taken that morning. A blurry, laughing boy, arms lifted, eyes shining. Behind him, only jungle. But as the image was passed around, one of the searchers frowned, zoomed in, enlarged. In the shadows of the trees, a face. Not Daniel's, not human? Later, the official report said heat distortion, a smudge, a trick of light. But Elena saw it, and that night, she didn't sleep. Not even when the helicopters came. Not even when the search was called off days later, because mothers know. And the jungle hadn't taken Daniel. It had chosen him. The phone rang twice before Elena picked up, not because she was eager, but because she always answered unknown numbers, just in case. 7 years had carved hollows beneath her eyes, not from age but from absence. Her São Paulo apartment was sterile, almost untouched since the day Daniel vanished. No family photos on the walls anymore, just one taped inside the kitchen cabinet, where she couldn't see it unless she wanted to. "This is Dax Moreira," said the voice on the line. She didn't recognize the name, not at first. Then, the search party. The man who left when the funding ran dry. "I found something," he said. She didn't move. If this is some kind of, it was near the Javari Valley, unmarked zone. There's a journal, waterlogged, child's handwriting. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. The world collapsed into a ringing silence like the static before a bomb drops. Dax continued. It mentioned symbols, dates, a name, Daniel, more than once. She gripped the edge of the countertop. Her knees wanted to buckle. Her voice was ice and fire. "Why now?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But if it's him, someone needs to—" "I'm coming," she said. "Elena, it's dangerous. I wasn't even supposed to be out there. The jungle." "I'm not asking," she snapped. Then softer. "You don't understand. I've lived inside that jungle every day since he disappeared. This city is just where I wait." She hung up before he could reply. In the mirror, she didn't see the grief-stricken woman she had been for 7 years. She saw someone returning to war. She opened the cabinet, looked at the photo. Daniel's face smiled back, frozen in sunlight. The rockets on his shirt clear as day. Hope was cruel. She knew that. But so was silence. Dax Moreira never liked mirrors. Not since the Venezuela expedition, the one that made headlines for all the wrong reasons. He stared at himself now anyway. The overhead light of a cheap Manaus hostel buzzing like a dying mosquito. His face looked older than his 38 years, weather-worn, eyes cracked with sleeplessness. He splashed water over his face, trying to wash off the memories, but they clung tighter than jungle sweat. He had promised himself, no more rescues, no more ghost chasing in places where even GPS gave up. But the moment he saw that shirt, the faded rockets against sky blue cotton, something shifted. Not curiosity, not fame, something colder. Debt. He opened the small tin box he carried everywhere, not for valuables but memories. Inside, a photograph, bent at the corners. 2 boys, one tall, grinning, one smaller, shy, clutching a compass. His brother, Lucas. Dax had been 17 when Lucas vanished during a family trip along the Rio Negro. No search parties back then, no news cycle. Just a drowning ruled probable by the police and spiritual by the tribes. But Dax never believed Lucas drowned. He'd heard the scream. 1 second, his brother was there. The next, the jungle had him. Years later, Dax became the man who went looking for other people's ghosts because he couldn't face his own. That's what the journalists called him. The Phantom Tracker. That title became both armor and prison. He picked up the journal again, Daniel Costa's journal. The pages smelled of mildew, death, time. But they also breathed something else. Fear. Real fear. A child's mind unraveling under unseen pressure. And the symbols. They matched the carvings he'd seen on an uncharted path in the northern basin, the ones no cartographer had ever cataloged, the ones tribes avoided. Dax stared at the lines again. One symbol repeated more than the others, a single vertical eye with branches for lashes. He didn't know what it meant. but he had seen it before. In Lucas's final drawing, Dax spread the pages across the wooden table, the jungle sounds outside his window muted only slightly by the thin shutters. Crickets chirped with a mechanical rhythm, like a warning coded in nature's language. The journal's middle section was nearly destroyed, smeared ink, torn corners, but a few pages had survived. And one held something astonishing, a map. It was crudely drawn, childlike in its execution but uncannily accurate. Dax recognized key tributaries of the Javari River. The elevation lines were wrong, inconsistent, but the path was clear, zigzagging through the forest, looping around a hill range, then plunging into a narrow chasm drawn in thick, frantic pencil. Beside it, over and over, the same phrase was scrawled in uneven handwriting. "The eye watches, the eye watches, the eye watches." He traced the route with his fingertip, feeling a chill even in the humid air. The final destination was marked with a single symbol, the eye again. No name, no coordinates, just that gaze. He flipped to the next page. Notes, sentences incomplete, scrawled in a hand more desperate than childish. "It follows if you look too long. The monkeys stop screaming there. I hear her at night, but it's not Mom." Dax swallowed hard. This wasn't just a survival journal. It was a descent. The territory the boy mapped out. Dax recognized it vaguely from his previous expeditions. It lay just beyond an uncharted basin avoided by both scientists and local tribes. A place the Javari refer to only as Ka Mirim, the sleeping forest. The locals said it was cursed, that even predators didn't hunt there, and no guides, not even the reckless ones, would take anyone through it. Dax had been close once. A chopper malfunction forced him to land 2 ridges short of the area, and even then, the crew reported nightmares. He stared again at the phrase on the map. The eye watches. He didn't know if Daniel Costa was alive, but wherever this path led, it hadn't let him go. The boat sliced upriver like a scalpel, parting water thick as oil under a sky that bled gold into green. Elena stood at the bow, her eyes fixed ahead as if willing the jungle to part and surrender its secrets. Behind her, Dax adjusted the straps of his gear. He'd hired a minimal team, a translator named Javi, young and wiry with nerves of steel, and Beatrice, a veteran field medic who didn't flinch when the forest screamed. The rest had backed out after seeing the map. Locals muttered about Ka Mirim and crossed themselves without irony. "This is suicide," Javi had said when he saw the eye symbol. "They say even the birds don't sing there." Now, as the boat turned into the narrower feeder stream marked on Daniel's map, silence began to fall in layers. The usual cacophony of the Amazon, cicadas, macaws, distant howler monkeys, faded into something unnatural, as if they'd breached a sound barrier. "I don't like this," Beatrice murmured, clutching her pack tighter. "You think I do?" Elena replied quietly. Her fingers closed around the photo tucked in her jacket pocket. She could feel the soft imprint of Daniel's face through the fabric. The trees grew denser, pressing inward like closing ribs. Vines dangled like veins, moss carpeting every visible surface. The air was so thick it felt like breathing through soaked cloth. Suddenly, a splash. A capuchin monkey darted across a branch overhead, but it didn't screech or chatter. It just watched, unblinking, silent. Another one appeared, then another. Their heads tilted at the same angle, their eyes following the boat without a sound. "Why are they so quiet?" Javi whispered. "They know something we don't," Dax muttered, scanning the tree line. "We've crossed into it. The maw." Elena said nothing. She only watched the bank approaching. Her body stiffened as the engine sputtered and the boat slowed near the marker on the map, a tree with a long scar down its trunk. A sign. Just like in the journal, beyond it, the jungle exhaled, and they stepped into its breath. The fire crackled low in the center of the circle, smoke curling into the twilight like a serpent seeking stars. They had stopped at a small riverside village just outside the marked perimeter. The people didn't speak much Portuguese, but fear translated fluently. An elder, eyes clouded with time, voice like dry leaves, agreed to speak with them. His name was Aratu, a shaman of the Ticuna people, and when Elena showed him the drawing of the eye from the journal, he recoiled as if it burned. "No one draws that," Javi translated. "It belongs to O Menino do Escuro, the boy who was taken, but never died." Elena leaned forward. "What do you mean? A legend?" Aratu lit a narrow pipe and inhaled slowly before answering. His voice was low, rhythmic, not a conversation, a telling. There was a child long ago. He was lost to the jungle after wandering too far. Days passed, then weeks. His body was never found. But the trees changed. Birds flew crooked. The monkeys wept and then stopped weeping. He paused, eyes gleaming in the firelight. Then the dreams began. Of a boy watching from the dark with black eyes. Of voices that called in the voice of your own blood. He was not dead. He had become something else. Javi hesitated before translating the next line. The jungle drank his soul but did not kill it. Dax crossed his arms, skeptical. So what? He's a forest ghost now? Aratu turned to him slowly. Not ghost, not spirit, still flesh, but changed, hungry. The jungle uses what it can keep. A silence followed. The kind that feels permanent. Elena's heart thudded. If it's just a story, she said softly, why does everyone still refuse to enter that land? Aratu met her gaze. Because we do not play with memory, and we do not chase what wishes not to be found. Behind them, the jungle rustled. Something brushed the edge of the firelight. No one looked. The jungle was thicker here. Every footstep was a negotiation with roots, moisture, and memory. Vines hung low, dripping with condensation like veins stretched too far. The heat pressed down on them, but it was the silence that weighed more. Dax was the first to spot it, half buried beneath a fallen log, corroded with age and time. A plastic case, cracked at the corners, the kind once used to protect handheld field recorders. He knelt, brushing away the moss with a gloved hand. It's military issue, he muttered. Probably from one of the earlier search parties. He popped it open. Inside, nestled among ruined batteries and mold, sat a small recorder. Beatrice took it carefully. Despite the rusted buttons, the tape inside looked intact. With a few twists and clicks from Dax, the recorder hissed to life. Then, static. Then, a voice. A child's voice. Faint. Warped. Looping. Ele veio através das árvores, the phrase repeated, rising and falling like a lullaby that didn't belong to any mother. Ele veio através das árvores. What's he saying? Elena asked, her voice tight. Javi paled. He watches through the trees. No one spoke. The tape kept playing. Ele vê, ele vê, ele vê. A crackle. A wet, gasping breath. Then the voice returned, louder, urgent. Não olhe de volta. Don't look back, Javi translated softly. Then silence. Beatrice hit stop. This isn't just a child talking, she said. He's trying to warn us. Elena clutched the recorder, her knuckles white. That was Daniel. I know his voice. Her hands trembled. He's alive. He has to be. Dax wasn't sure what he believed anymore. The recorder was decades old. The jungle ate electronics faster than flesh. And yet, the voice was clear, preserved like it wanted to be heard. Suddenly, from deep within the trees, something moved. Fast, too fast. The foliage quivered. No animal cry, just the echo of breath, human breath, sucked in sharply and swallowed back into the green. Beatrice grabbed her rifle. Elena turned toward the sound. Dax's voice cut through it, low and firm. "Don't look back." The jungle didn't sleep. Not truly. It pulsed, a heartbeat of shadows and chirps and low, wet croaks that never ceased. But tonight something had changed. The rhythm faltered, paused, waited. Elena lay awake in the sweltering tent, her eyes wide open, staring at the thin mesh between her and the living dark. Her skin was slick with sweat, but her blood had gone cold. The others had drifted off hours ago, exhausted from the day's trek. But she couldn't stop hearing it, the laugh. At first, she thought it was a bird mimicking something human. The jungle did that, played tricks. Then she heard it again. Faint, delicate, unmistakable. A child, laughing, giggling. Daniel. Her body jolted upright. She unzipped the tent flap slowly, her flashlight trembling in her grip. Outside, moonlight filtered through the leaves in gauzy beams. The air shimmered with humidity. The others' tents sat still, untouched by movement or sound. Then, there, at the edge of camp, a figure, small, thin. She couldn't see his face, but the silhouette was heartbreakingly familiar. The curve of the shoulders, the way he tilted his head. "Daniel?" she whispered. He turned, just slightly, and darted into the brush. "Elena?" Dax's voice behind her, rough with sleep. But she was already moving, heart pounding in her throat, flashlight beams slicing through ferns and fog. She stumbled through tangled roots, branches clawing at her clothes, chasing the sound of laughter echoing between trees. It was closer now, all around her, giggling, then gasping, as if one voice had become many. She stopped, spun around. The jungle held its breath again. That's when she saw them, figures in the trees, not just one child, half a dozen, limbs elongated, eyes shining where there should have been pupils. Watching her, the laughter stopped, and something else began. A whisper, not in words, but in hunger, felt deep in the spine. Behind her, Dax caught up, grabbed her wrist. "Elena, we have to go, now." She looked back one last time. Nothing there, but the sound. The sound had never left. The scream was brief, too brief to be useful. Dax was up first, machete in hand, slicing through thick brush toward the sound. The others stumbled behind him, groggy and tense. Beatrice scanned the trees with her rifle. Javi's face was drained of all color. They reached the spot in less than a minute. The jungle was still, no blood, no struggle, no body. Just a single item lying in the mud like an offering. Javi's compass. Elena knelt, picking it up. It was cracked, the needle spinning erratically. "He was right behind us last night," she said. "He was in his tent." Dax didn't respond. He was staring past her into the undergrowth, eyes wide, not with fear, but with recognition. There was a trail now, barely visible, crushed leaves, twisted ferns, no footprints. But the brush had parted in a path too clean to be natural. Something had moved through here, swift, deliberate. "He didn't wander," Beatrice said. "Something took him." Dax turned away suddenly, his jaw clenched, vision blurred. Lucas. His brother had disappeared just like this. No warning, no noise. 1 second walking beside him, the next, gone. Only the glint of the compass Lucas always wore, a gift from Dax himself, left behind on the forest floor. He'd never told the others that story, but now it was clawing its way out of him. He gripped the nearest tree to steady himself. Its bark was smooth, almost too smooth. His hand came away, sticky. Red sap oozed slowly down the trunk. It wasn't blood, not quite, but it felt like the forest was bleeding. "We turn back," Beatrice said. "Now." "No," Elena snapped. "This is the trail. Daniel led us here. I know it. Javi could be alive. Or worse, Beatrice whispered. We keep going, and we lose more than him. Dax finally spoke, voice low and hollow. We're past the point of return. This place, it doesn't let go once it opens. He picked up the compass, turning it over. Something was scratched into the back, something that hadn't been there before. A single word, stay. They saw it before they felt it, a rise in the earth, a thinning of the canopy, and then, towering like a cathedral made of flesh and memory, the tree. It stood alone in a clearing the jungle seemed to bow around. Its trunk was massive, wider than a truck, bark thick and veined like scar tissue. But it wasn't the size that stopped them cold. It was the carvings, symbols, hundreds, maybe thousands. The same ones from Daniel's journal, etched into the bark as if by fingernails and stone. The eye, repeated over and over, sometimes open, sometimes sealed shut. Other marks too, spirals, claw-like swirls, sharp lines that formed the outline of something vaguely human, or once human. Dax ran his fingers over one, fresh. The sap still bled from it, slow and red. This wasn't done years ago, he murmured. This is recent. Elena turned slowly, taking in the rest of the clearing. Her breath caught. All around the base of the tree, half buried in moss and roots, were small structures, primitive, almost ceremonial. Tiny frames made from bones, twigs tied in crude triangles, and something worse. Children's shoes, molded, broken, some no larger than her palm. They're totems, Beatrice said. Her voice was strained. Markers, maybe. Shrines. Elena stepped toward one, her heart hammering. It was a tiny cross, built from 2 femur bones, tied with twine made from jungle fiber, or hair. Inside the totem was a rolled scrap of blue fabric, faded but unmistakable. Cartoon rocket ships, Daniel's shirt. She sank to her knees, the grief crashing through her like a wave. He had been here, maybe still was. Then she noticed something else, a hollow at the base of the tree, like a burrow, large enough for a child to crawl into. Scratches lined the entry, small fingernail marks. Elena, Dax's voice was sharp. She looked up. From the carvings above, the eye stared down, not etched, burned in. And this one was different. It was watching. That night, the jungle wrapped its breath around them like a blanket soaked in fever. The air pressed in too thick to breathe, and the trees didn't move, not with wind, not with life, as if the entire forest were listening. Elena lay still in her tent, but her mind drifted into a sleep too deep, too vivid. In the dream, she was standing alone on a riverbank. The water was glass, unmoving, but filled with reflections that rippled despite the stillness, twisted images of herself, her son, the eye. Then she heard the laugh, software familiar. She looked up. High above, crouched in the crook of a giant tree limb, was Daniel, not as she remembered him. Older, 10, maybe 11, shirtless, hair tangled with leaves, eyes shining in the moonlight like wet obsidian. He didn't move. He just watched her, studied her, like an animal curious about its prey or its mother, and unsure which she was. Daniel, she whispered, but the name didn't reach him. Or maybe it did, and he chose not to hear. His face broke into a smile, slow and strange. There was no warmth in it, only recognition. Then a sound behind her, a rustle in the reeds, wet footsteps. She turned, heart hammering, but nothing was there. When she turned back to the tree, he was gone. Now he was closer, standing just beyond the tree line. And when he spoke, it was without moving his lips. "You're not supposed to be here." Her knees buckled. The jungle began to change, melt, twist. The trees leaned in. The water turned black. The dream shook. She jolted awake, covered in sweat, Breath shivering, she sat up fast. The tent flap trembled slightly, though there was no wind. Outside, something scraped the bark. She held her breath, and from somewhere beyond the clearing, a child's voice carried across the dark. It said her name. Not Mom. Elena. Dawn broke not with light, but with a deep orange haze that clung to the jungle like an old bruise. Birds didn't sing. The insects were silent. Even the wind seemed to crawl rather than move. Dax was the first to stir, stepping outside the tent with the unease of someone who knows the ground beneath them is no longer neutral. He checked the perimeter. Nothing had shifted, yet everything felt altered, as if the jungle had turned slightly in its sleep and forgotten they were here. Elena, he called quietly. She emerged, pale and silent, her eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. She clutched the photo of Daniel like it was the last thing tethering her to the known world. He said my name last night, she murmured. Not Mom, just Elena. Before Dax could respond, Beatrice's voice cut through the trees. Here, you need to see this. They found her by the edge of the clearing, kneeling near an old termite mound, half swallowed by roots. In her gloved hand, she held a scrap of fabric, stiff, with dried blood, edges torn. It was blue, faded, patterned with the faint outline of rockets. Daniel's shirt. Elena dropped beside her, trembling fingers reaching for it. But Beatrice stopped her. Wait. Look. She turned the scrap over carefully. Someone had sewn something into the lining. Small, fraying strips of cloth, thin as rice paper. Messages, handwritten, scrawled in childish Portuguese. The trees don't forget. They teach you how to stay still. Don't speak if the leaves are watching. I forget my birthday. I remember Mom's hands. The dark hums, and it's hungry. Then the last line, stitched directly into the seam, written not in ink, but something brown, dried, and cracked. I don't know if I'm still me. Elena clutched the fabric to her chest, tears spilling silently. Her son had written this. He had survived, long enough to fear what he was becoming. Dax stepped back, disturbed. The jungle hadn't just taken the boy. It had taught him something. And maybe it hadn't let him come back. The trail narrowed beneath a canopy so dense it stole the light from the air. It was almost noon, but the jungle glowed with a dim, green twilight, like they were underwater. Dax hacked away at the vines ahead. Beatrice scanned the trees with sharp eyes, fingers tight around the stock of her rifle. Elena followed in silence, the scrap of Daniel's shirt tied around her wrist like a talisman. They moved slowly. The ground here was soft, damp with layers of rot. Footsteps didn't echo. Sounds were swallowed. Then they saw him. It was Beatrice who stopped first, one hand raised. There, she whispered. 30 feet ahead, half hidden between two gnarled roots, stood a figure. Small, barefoot, shirtless, legs mud-slick, head bowed. A child. Time froze. Even the jungle seemed to hesitate. Elena's heart exploded in her chest. Daniel? Her voice was a cracked whisper. The figure lifted its head, not fully, just enough for her to glimpse the shape of his face. Familiar. Wrong. Familiar again. Eyes too wide. Cheekbones sharp where baby fat once lived. But it was him. She stepped forward instinctively. Elena, wait. Dax grabbed her arm, but she shook him off violently. Daniel, she cried, louder. It's me. I'm here. The boy blinked slowly, one step backward, and then he vanished, not ran, not turned, simply gone, like fog retreating from the sun. Elena screamed, the kind of scream that came from the gut, from 7 years of wandering break-in, building a world without a son. No, that was him. You saw it. You saw it. She dropped to her knees in the mud, hands clawing at the space he'd just occupied. Dax knelt beside her, arms around her shoulders. It might have been him, but he's not alone in there anymore. She sobbed into his chest. Behind them, Beatrice scanned the trees, rifle trembling slightly now, because for the briefest second, when the child had looked up, she had seen something behind his eyes, a shadow, watching through him. They found the tribe by accident, not on any map, no records. Not even the native guides back in Tefé had mentioned a settlement this deep, this hidden. The jungle simply opened up around a bend in the river, revealing huts made of woven palm and bone, smoke rising in thin lines from fires that smelled not like wood, but herbs and thyme. 20 figures emerged from the shadows, eyes black as the forest floor, bare chests streaked with ash, silent, unmoving, not with fear, but with the weary patience of people who had seen too much. Beatrice raised her hands in a universal gesture of peace. We don't want harm. We seek someone. One of the elders stepped forward. His skin was a latticework of old scars, and around his neck hung a totem shaped like an eye. Dax tried a mix of Portuguese and fragmented Ngatu. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. The elder nodded, slowly. They knew of the boy. Not his name, but his shadow. They called him O Menino Entre Mundos, the boy between worlds. He came from the sky, the elder rasped. The river swallowed him. The forest gave him back. Different. He was not raised. He survived, lived like an animal, feared like a spirit, whispered of in stories told to frighten children into obedience. He walks the lines between the breath and the after. The jungle listens to him and fears him. Is he alive? Elena asked, voice raw. The elder tilted his head. A spirit walks, but so does flesh. Here, there is no difference. They pressed, desperate. Still, the answer never came. The tribe would not say if the boy lived, only that he remained, as a warning, as a whisper, as something else. That night they were allowed to stay, outside the village walls, and just before dawn, Elena awoke to soft footsteps just beyond the firelight. She turned. A child's silhouette stood at the jungle's edge, watching, and when she blinked, it was gone. The entrance was almost hidden, a mouth in the jungle, veiled behind curtains of moss and ferns. The tribe had not led them here, but their silence had pointed the way. Dax had noticed the rock formations on the old maps, but they were always marked only with warnings, never names. They didn't speak as they entered. Even Beatrice, ever skeptical, moved carefully, as if the air itself had weight. The cave was narrow at first, walls damp and close, forcing them single file. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Not the chill of air, but something older, more primal. Then the passage opened into a chamber. Their flashlights illuminated 1,000 small points. Bones, hundreds of them, embedded into the walls like teeth in a great mouth. Skulls, femurs, vertebrae, human, animal, indistinguishable from one another in the dim light. Jesus, Dax muttered. It's a tomb. No, Elena whispered, staring at the walls. It's a shrine. There were drawings, painted in clay, ash, blood, some primitive, others disturbingly detailed. A progression, almost. Stick figures giving way to near realism. Scenes of the jungle birthing children, of people with vines instead of limbs, of a figure, always a child, with black holes where eyes should be. And then they saw it. A face on the far wall, painted large, prominent, familiar. Daniel. Elena's knees nearly gave out. That's him. That's my son. But the longer they stared, the less sure they became. It was Daniel. And it wasn't. The cheekbones were right. The mouth. But the eyes? Wrong. Hollow. stretched, surrounded by symbols. Dax took a slow step forward. There were fresh claw marks beneath the mural, as if someone, or something, had scratched at the wall in reverence or rage. Beneath the painting was another shape, a spiral, and at its center, an eye. Same as on the tree, same as the totems. Only here, it wasn't painted. It had been carved into the stone, from the inside out. Dax stepped back. "Elena," he said, voice trembling. "We're not here to find him." He looked at her, pale. "We're here because he called us." The fire crackled low. Embers pulsed like dying stars, casting long shadows that danced across damp canvas and bone-colored stone. No one spoke. Not until the silence became unbearable. Then, finally, the guide spoke. His name was Aloisio, a wiry man from San Gabriel with eyes that never seemed to settle. For days he had remained on the periphery, quiet, dutiful, but now he leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. "I saw the boy," he said, 3 years ago, near the Tapajos." Everyone froze. Beatrice turned first. "What?" Aloisio didn't look at her. He stared into the flames like they were a confession booth. "I was working supply runs to a logging camp, en route. Got separated from the team during a storm. 2 days alone in the bush. Thought I was going to die." He paused, swallowed. Then I heard laughter. Dax leaned in. "Children?" "One, a boy, small, but not scared." His hands trembled slightly. He didn't run, just stood there, watching, covered in mud, hair like vines. But his eyes— Elena said nothing. Her throat was closing. "They weren't wild," Aloisio continued. "They were empty, not blank, hollow. Like he was wearing a child's body but not being it." "Why didn't you say anything?" Beatrice asked, sharp. Aloisio's jaw tightened. "Because when I blinked, he was gone. And when I turned to leave, I saw the eye, carved into a tree. Same as here." Dax nodded slowly. "So he survived?" "No?" Aloisio looked up now. "I think he didn't. Not all of him." He stood suddenly, as if the confession had cracked something loose in him. He pulled aside his shirt collar. A thin scar curled down his shoulder blade. "Something scratched me. That night. I never saw it. But the fever lasted a month. And sometimes I dream in symbols." "What symbols?" Elena asked, her voice barely audible. He answered with a whisper, "The spiral. The eye. The boy." Outside, a branch snapped. Not far. Not an animal. Not a storm. A step. The recorder clicked to life with a hiss. And then, silence. They sat around the fire, barely breathing. Dax had found the old cassette player buried inside a rusted metal case, sealed with wax and stuffed into a leather satchel near the cave's mouth. Inside were 2 tapes, unmarked. Elena stared at the player like it might bite. Then, it began. A boy's voice, muffled, breathless, crying. "Help me. Please, help me. I don't want to forget." The sobs cracked like something inside the lungs had broken. It was Daniel. That voice, unmistakable, but strained, too thin, as though it came through water. The crying stopped. Silence again. Then, a laugh. It started soft, hesitant. But it built, not into joy, but something distorted, lopsided, like a child mimicking laughter they'd heard but didn't understand. And then it changed. What came next wasn't human. The laughter twisted, deepened, grew guttural, animalistic, breathy, broken, as if the speaker had more than one voice, 2 sounds overlapping inside a single throat. Beatrice turned pale. Dax stopped the tape. The silence that followed was louder than the sound itself. "That wasn't just a recording," Elena said. Her voice shook, but not from fear alone, from recognition. That was him. But not just him. Dax rewound the tape, pressing play again on a short section, the shift between the boy's sobs and that unearthly laugh. Beatrice leaned in. "Play it slower." He did. Slowed down, the laugh became something else. Words, faint, disguised in the sound. "She will come. She always comes." Elena's hand flew to her mouth. The jungle was watching, the trees leaning. She stood suddenly, staggering back. He knew. He left this for me. He wanted me to hear that. Her breath came in shallow bursts. Beatrice looked grim. Or, whatever he's becoming wanted you to hear it. Behind them, the recorder clicked. Tape 2 auto-loaded. But this time, there was no crying. Only breathing. And something else, breathing with it. They sat in the cave's mouth as dusk fell, the jungle pulsing beyond the roots like something alive and ancient, humming with slow hunger. The second tape played quietly, looping now, a long, slow inhale, a second exhale, and just beneath it, a heartbeat. Not mechanical, organic, listening. Dax switched it off. No one spoke for a long time. Then Beatrice said, "What if that's not him anymore?" Elena didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the spiral carved into the stone across from them. A silent eye watching, never blinking. "You think he's gone?" she asked, not turning. Beatrice shrugged, but her voice was steady. "The boy who went missing at age 6 might not exist anymore, not as we understand it. We have to start asking the real question." Dax answered without looking at her. "Do we bring him back?" Silence followed. The question hovered, not just in their minds, but in the air, like a verdict waiting to be passed. Elena stood. Her voice, when it came, was low and shaking. "He's still my son." "But is he still a child?" Beatrice asked softly. "Or has the jungle made something else out of him? Something it doesn't want to give back?" Dax added, "You saw what he did to the walls, the symbols, the messages, and the recordings. Elena, if we take him out, what are we bringing with us?" Elena turned slowly, eyes glassy with rage and grief. "If it were your child, would you hesitate?" Beatrice didn't flinch. "Yes. If my child could tear through the world like a blade, I'd want to know whether saving him meant unleashing him." Elena stepped away from them both, into the trees, toward the darkness. She spoke without looking back. "If he's still breathing, I'll find him." "And if he isn't the same?" Dax asked quietly. She turned her face half over her shoulder. "Then I'll bring back what's left." Somewhere deeper in the jungle, a branch cracked, and a second later, something laughed, softly, from very close. They found him at dawn, just past the river bend, where the roots twisted into skeletal fingers and the mist hung like gauze. Dax spotted the footprints first. Bare, narrow, fresh. The shape of a child, but wrong. Toes splayed like he'd forgotten shoes, forgotten people, forgotten being human. Elena was the first to follow them through the underbrush, heart pounding against her ribs. Every breath felt like an apology, every step a prayer. Then she saw him, standing in a shaft of filtered light, still as bark. He was older now, taller, lean, skin darkened by the sun, marred with dirt and small scars. His hair had grown wild, matted with leaves and bits of moss. He wore nothing but a strip of cloth, and even that seemed like it didn't belong to him. But his face, that face, her knees went weak. "Daniel," she whispered. The name cracked in her throat like a dried branch. He didn't turn. Only when she stepped forward did his head tilt slightly, like a deer hearing something shift in the wind. "Daniel," she said again, louder this time. "It's me. It's Mommy." His eyes met hers, and in that moment, the world shattered. There was no recognition, no flicker of warmth, no pain, no confusion, just blankness, as if her face were no different than a leaf, or a cloud, or a bird he'd once watched fly overhead. Tears rolled down Elena's face. She stepped closer. Please, baby. I've been looking for you. For so long. Her hand reached out, trembling. Then, he moved, quick, animal fast, a blur of limbs. He bolted, disappearing into the jungle with impossible speed, silent as shadow, gone before the echo of her voice had faded. Daniel! She ran after him, but Beatrice held her back, firm, unflinching. That wasn't the reunion you imagine, she said softly. Elena collapsed to her knees, eyes still searching the brush. No, she whispered. That wasn't the end. From the jungle came only silence, but the feeling lingered. He had seen her, and chosen to flee. The campfire hissed as Beatrice tossed on another wet log. Smoke drifted in tight spirals, disappearing into the thick canopy above. Elena sat cross-legged in the dirt, eyes locked on the path where Daniel had vanished. Her hands trembled, still stained with the damp of jungle earth and the ache of what she could not hold. He looked right at me, she whispered. He knew me. Dax shook his head slowly. Elena. That wasn't recognition. That was instinct. Survival. He's afraid, she said. That doesn't mean he's lost. Beatrice stood, brushing the mud from her cargo pants, voice tight. Or it means the thing inside him remembers what it once was, and doesn't want it back. The jungle around them crackled softly. Insects, birds, the shifting breath of something too vast to name. The same jungle that had kept a child alive for 7 years. Or transformed him into something that only looked like a child. We can't just drag him out, Dax said. He'd never survive re-entry into the world. He doesn't even speak. He didn't flinch at your voice, Elena. You think he remembers, but what if all that's left is the shell? Elena's voice sharpened. Then I'm not leaving without the shell. Beatrice's rifle rested across her lap. Her jaw was clenched, unreadable. There's a line, she said. Between rescue and hunt. We cross it. We become the threat. The jungle gave him back, yes? But maybe that was a warning, not an offering. A heavy silence followed, and then Elena spoke. I didn't come here to leave him behind again. You can either help me bring him home. She looked up, eyes glassy but burning. Or you can stay and write the report. Dax sighed, looked at Beatrice, then quietly slung his pack over his shoulder. I'll go with her. Beatrice didn't answer, just stared into the trees as if waiting for them to answer back. The jungle changed that night. It no longer whispered. It growled. The air thickened like soup, heavy with moisture and rot. A fever settled over the camp, invisible but suffocating. Dax woke first, drenched in sweat, his body convulsing in small, jerking spasms. Elena found him curled near the fire, teeth chattering despite the heat. I can't see straight, he gasped. Everything's moving. Beatrice checked his pulse, but her own hands were shaking. A strange pattern had bloomed across his skin. Raised welts, like vines curling just beneath the flesh. They pulsed in rhythm, as if alive. Elena, Beatrice whispered, this place, it's rejecting us. She wasn't wrong. By midday the flies came, not in swarms, but as scouts, slow, deliberate, landing on skin that had barely cooled, hovering in eyes, crawling into open mouths. The birds stopped singing, the monkeys vanished, and in the distance, always just out of sight, was the boy, watching, waiting. Then Miguel died. They'd barely known him, a quiet, broad-shouldered local scout hired in Tefe. He hadn't spoken since the cave. Now, his body lay sprawled near the riverbank, eyes wide and mouth open mid-scream, as though something had been pulled from him in the night. No wounds, no signs of struggle, only his fingernails, ripped, clawing into the mud as if trying to dig down, not escape out. Beatrice zipped the body bag with a trembling hand. We have to leave, now. Elena stared into the trees, not without Daniel. "This jungle doesn't want us here," Beatrice said. "It's not passive, it's deciding." And that's when Dax spoke, voice ragged and hollow. "I saw him again last night." They turned to him. "He came into camp. He stood over me. His eyes were black, not like pupils, like caves. And when he leaned close..." Dax paused, shivered. "I think he was trying to remember if I used to be his friend." Silence. Then thunder rolled through the canopy like a growl. The jungle had made its judgment. Now it was only a matter of who it would let live. The fire had long burned down to its bones. Only embers remained, scattered red stars glowing in the ash, like the last warmth of a dying world. Beatrice slept sitting up, rifle in her lap, eyes twitching beneath closed lids. Dax lay curled near his pack, muttering incoherently, gripped by a fever dream that wouldn't release him. Elena sat alone, still. The jungle had gone silent again, but this time it wasn't a hush. It was a breath held. Then came the crunch of leaves behind her, software barefoot. She didn't turn, didn't move, only said gently, "Daniel." The boy stepped into the edge of the light. He was thinner than before, eyes sunken, hair hanging like wet rope. No sound came from his movements. He glided, not walked, as though Earth itself had learned to carry him. He knelt across from her, on the other side of the fire. Elena barely breathed. Her voice trembled. "Do you remember me?" He tilted his head, studied her, his lips parted, and then, in perfect, haunting English, he spoke. "I'm not your son." The words cracked her. She felt it like a bullet behind her ribs. No scream came, only stillness. Her eyes stung, but no tears fell. "Yes," she said softly, "you are." He blinked, slowly, like it was a habit remembered rather than felt. He died. The jungle kept the body, but not the boy. I was made from what was left. His voice was flat, almost robotic, but there was a tremble beneath it, the echo of memory, or pain, or something far worse. Elena reached across the fire, hand outstretched. "You're still Daniel, somewhere inside." He leaned back, like her hand burned from a distance. "You should leave before the jungle decides you belong to it too," she whispered. "I already do." He stared at her for a long, unbroken second, then vanished into the dark, like mist, leaving only the smell of damp earth and ash, and a mother shaking beside a fire too cold to remember what it once warmed. The jungle was still when she found him again. He stood at the edge of the roots, where the earth cracked open and tree limbs bent like ribs around an ancient pit. The nest. It wasn't a structure. It wasn't a home. It was a place where time nodded and bled. Daniel stood barefoot on the rim. Elena approached slowly. No calls, no demands, just the rhythm of her breath, the ache of her heart. He turned before she could speak. His face had softened, not into innocence, but into something sadder. A kind of resignation only children who've died twice can wear. "I remember," he said quietly. Elena's eyes filled instantly. "I remember your hands. They were warm. I remember the smell of cinnamon on your coat. I remember the sound you made when you laughed at nothing." Her lips parted, but the words failed her. "I remember loving you," he said, "but it doesn't fit anymore, not inside me." She stepped closer, one pace, then another. "Then let me carry it," she whispered. "Let me carry what's left." Daniel's gaze dropped. He looked at his fingers, stained with earth, shaking. "I belong to this place now. It called me back. Every time I tried to go, it reminded me what I'd become." He looked up. "You can't save me." Elena's voice cracked. "Then let me stay." A long silence, and then, Gently, he shook his head. If you stay, it will change you. It already has. You'll forget who you are, just like I did. A pause. Then he said it. Final. Soft. Like a goodbye. I don't want that for you. Her legs buckled. She sank to the ground, weeping without sound. Not because he was gone, but because she could no longer follow. The boy stepped backward into the roots, vanishing without resistance, as though the earth remembered him. And the jungle exhaled, not in hunger this time, in release. They didn't speak when they left, not because there was nothing to say, but because some things, once broken, lose the shape of words. Dax limped through the dense foliage with a 1,000-yard stare. His fever had broken, but left behind something worse. Stillness. The kind of silence that settles over soldiers after war. He didn't ask what Elena saw at the nest. He didn't want to know. Beatrice walked behind them, eyes on the trees. She kept her rifle slung across her chest but never touched it. Not anymore. It was a relic now, a tool for the old world, useless against what they'd found inside this one. And Elena didn't cry. Not since the nest. She moved like a shadow, not consumed, but emptied, not grieving, but hollowed. A vessel that had held too much for too long. She still clutched the tattered pages of Daniel's journal. She didn't reread them. She didn't have to. They reached the river by dusk. A boat waited, the same one they'd arrived in weeks ago. Or was it months? Time stretched in the Amazon, bent, cracked. The boatman didn't speak as he saw them emerge, covered in mud, ash, and silence. He simply nodded and started the engine. As they drifted away, the jungle didn't roar, it didn't cry, it didn't beg. It simply watched, 1,000 unseen eyes in the trees, 1,000 breaths in the wind, and far behind them, deep beneath the roots, something small and human-shaped curled into itself like a secret buried in time. They wouldn't see him again, but he was there, still breathing, still listening, still becoming. Elena turned once in the boat, looked back. Her lips parted, not for speech, for breath, as though something had been torn from her. Not a limb, not a life, but a truth. She whispered it into the wind where no one could hear. He let me go. And the jungle, that ancient watching thing, let her go too. But only just. 3 weeks later, Elena sat under the sterile lights of a news studio in São Paulo, her face pale, her voice measured. She recounted the boy in the jungle, the cave, the journal, the tapes, the eyes that weren't her son's anymore. The anchor across from her blinked twice, adjusted her cards, and offered the tight, polished smile of polite disbelief. So, your son is alive, the anchor said slowly, but also not your son, and he speaks now? After 7 years in the wild? Elena nodded. He remembered me, but he didn't want to leave. And you're certain this wasn't some projection? A trauma response? Elena leaned forward. You weren't there. The anchor's smile never faltered. But that's the issue, isn't it? No photographs, no samples, no video, not even the boy. Just a mother's word, a beat. Then the soundbite, the one that would play again and again online. Is it possible this is just grief? Elena didn't answer, not with words, just stared into the camera. Let the silence say what her voice no longer could. The headlines the next day were merciless. Woman claims jungle took son's soul. No proof found, grief or madness. Missing boy case takes bizarre, turn explorers tell tale of wild child in Amazon. Scientists laugh, Dax refused interviews. Beatrice disappeared entirely. Elena sat alone in her apartment, blinds drawn, the jungle still alive behind her eyelids. She played the tape again, Daniel's voice warped by static, whispering, "I'm not your son." No one believed them. But sometimes, just before sleep, she would feel it. That same pull in her gut. The jungle's breath, stretching across miles. Through soil and wire and dream. Not done, not finished, not over. Because the world didn't believe, but the jungle did. And the jungle never forgets what it keeps. The notebook was stained with sweat, rain, and something darker that smelled like memory. Dax stared down at the last blank page. His hands trembled as he uncapped his pen, the same one he'd used on oil rigs in Bolivia, in lost cities in Peru, and now, finally, in a place he couldn't name, deep inside a jungle that didn't exist on maps but lived vividly behind his eyelids. The page stayed empty for a long time. Then he began to write. Final entry, June 29th. Location, somewhere no GPS can define, but it doesn't matter. We got out. But we didn't come back whole. His pen scratched louder in the silence of his room, a cramped space above a bar in Iquitos. A fan spun overhead, useless against the sweat pooling at his collar. Outside, life pulsed. Boats, children, radios, things that made noise because they could. But inside him, only roots. The jungle didn't just take the boy. It took our certainty, our understanding. It took the framework we use to tell ourselves what's real. We saw him. We heard him. We lost him again. He paused, hand cramping, eyes burning. The thing is, I'm not sure we were meant to find him. I think the jungle wanted us to look. That was the point. Because it's not about the boy anymore. It never was. It's about what the jungle is willing to give you, and what it demands in return. Dax exhaled sharply. Then, slowly, deliberately, he flipped to the front cover and pressed a shaking thumb into the corner, leaving a dark smudge, a fingerprint, a mark. To whoever finds this, go back if you want answers, but know this. Answers are not what the jungle gives. It gives mirrors. And if you stare too long, you forget your name. He closed the notebook and stared at it like a coffin. Then, without warning, he stood, walked to the river, and dropped it in. Not to erase it, but to return it. To the thing that had written its own story in their blood. The office was small, clean, painted in warm, earthy tones, like memories softened by time. On the wall behind Elena hung a photo of a boy. Not Daniel, not really. It was a digitally aged image, the kind missing children's services use to guess at what time might do to innocence. Smiling, hopeful, frozen in the future he never lived. Beneath it, a simple plaque for the lost who were never sought. Daniel's Light Foundation. She signed the last of the documents with a firm hand, lips pressed together as if the ink required silence to dry. Across the desk sat a social worker, eyes glimmering with careful sympathy. "You're doing something extraordinary," the woman said gently. "This could change lives." Elena nodded but didn't smile. It should have changed his. There were already 16 children in the program, undocumented, unclaimed, discarded by the system. Street children, jungle orphans. One girl from Acre had claw marks along her back. Another refused to speak except in whispers to trees. They called Elena Tia, Auntie. They didn't know her grief, only her kindness. That was enough. Every week, she hosted a quiet circle where the children shared stories, drawings, dreams. Some talked of places no one else remembered, of trees that glowed at night, of footsteps without feet. Elena never dismissed any of it. She only listened. Because some children don't lie. They remember. And sometimes she wondered if Daniel had been the first, or merely the first to be seen. Late that night, She sat alone in the Foundation office, fingers tracing the edges of Daniel's journal, the real one, worn, almost falling apart. She opened to the last page, blank, then, slowly, wrote, "You're still mine, even if the world doesn't believe it, and beneath it, I'm still listening." She left the page open on the desk, in case he ever came back, not to find her, but to remember who he was. The rain fell soft and straight, like it had been waiting. In the town of San Raimundo, on the ragged edge of the jungle, most people didn't look up when it started. They'd lived too long at the fringe of mystery to fear weather. But that morning, something in the air held weight, like the breath of something old returning. A boy stood at the tree line, no shoes, no umbrella, just bare feet on soaked soil and eyes too dark to reflect anything but sky. His hair was long, tangled, his clothes, not clothes really, stitched hides and fiber, crafted not for style but survival. He watched the town with no urgency, like someone remembering a dream. A fisherman saw him first, froze, squinted into the rain like it might lie. When he finally blinked, the boy was gone. But others began to speak. A nurse swore she saw him from her rooftop garden, just beyond the church. A taxi driver said the headlights caught something human at 4 a.m., crouched beside the highway, eyes glowing. None of them could say how he moved, only that he was never quite there. News never made it past local forums. A blurry photo posted online got dismissed as fake, another jungle feral rumor, but Elena saw him. From the second-story window of the Foundation, in the rain, just before nightfall, he was standing across the street, soaked, still, and watching her. She stepped slowly to the glass, her hand lifted before she could think, not to wave, but to feel the air between them. He didn't smile. He didn't run, but he nodded, a small tilt of the head, like recognition. Then he turned and disappeared into the trees. No footprints left in the mud, no sound but the hush of falling rain. But for the first time in years, Elena closed her eyes and smiled. The rain stopped sometime before dawn. Mist rose like breath from the forest floor, curling between roots and limbs, wrapping the world in silence. The sun had not yet broken the canopy, and the jungle shimmered in that pale silver blue that belonged only to the hour before remembering. Deep in the green, where no trail led and no satellite could see, a tree stood newly grown. Its bark was smooth, pale, not yet hardened by years. But there, near the base, etched deep into its flesh, was a symbol, an eye, encircled by thorned vines, just like in the journal. But this time, it wasn't ink. It was scar. It had grown into the wood, as though the tree had always known. A bird landed on a nearby branch and cocked its head at the mark, chirped once, then flew off without song. And somewhere, close, but impossible to find, a low hum stirred the air. Not animal, not wind, something older, something listening, something watching. Beneath the earth, roots shifted like fingers curling in sleep. Above, the leaves rustled without breeze, because the jungle did not forget. It did not forgive. It did not release. It simply waited. And Daniel, or whatever he had become, watched too, not with fear, not with longing, but with the calm awareness of something that had passed through death and returned changed. He crouched in the high branches, barely visible in the half-light, skin nearly indistinguishable from bark. His eyes were quiet now, knowing, not lost, not found, just part of the forest that had claimed him. He reached one hand out and touched the carved eye. His fingers fit the grooves perfectly. He didn't smile, but somewhere in the deep, far from the reach of memory or map, he whispered something soft, like a name or a warning, And the tree answered. The jungle remembered, and it was remembering more